Hey, welcome everybody to this RadPod news breaker. We are so excited to have our financial correspondent, Martin Sheil, with us. It's been quite a big week. As we know, I'm here, of course, with my producing partner, Fidelity. I'm Heidi Cuda. Our show is an investigative show about disinformation as well as many other things. But one of the things that we are focused on always is truth, accountability, and just really getting to, getting beneath the headlines to figure out what's going on as we navigate what has been an ongoing, essentially disinformation war. We all know that Donald Trump is very good at obfuscation. He shares that with the Kremlin. He's very good at distraction, propaganda, countering the narrative, anything to avoid the evidence of, a long history of not paying people and, settling on courtroom steps for nefarious, accusations. And we finally get to see a glimpse of the inner workings, and that is why we are bringing in Martin Sheil, who spent many, many years working for the Internal Revenue Service as a criminal investigator. And Martin, what has this week brought? What are some of the red flags? What do we need to know about Trump's tax returns?
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Heidi. It's my pleasure to be here. With regard to Trump's taxes, really, where do you begin? I think you have to begin with the congressional committee report that has been issued with regard to, it's a summary of what they looked at relative to Trump's tax returns. The returns themselves, just to break this down a little bit, have not actually been released. There's supposed to be a big dump of tax returns, Trump tax returns, that could happen anytime as soon as tomorrow. More likely will happen next week. And as an old experienced tax investigator, an investigator always prefers to see the original documents. You can get granular there. So I'm always reluctant to comment or draw conclusions, certainly from a summary report, particularly a summary report done by folks I don't know and who may have their own agendas. But still, let's take a look at that summary report. They do hit on a lot of areas of importance, and I would just I'm just going to talk about a couple. I don't want to bore your viewers. I mean, unless you want to get into easements and net operating losses and whatnot, I'll be happy to talk about that. But I think I'll give you the overview.
Let's stick with some of the high concepts. We'll get into the easements and diseasements another time, but let's stick with some of the basics.
We want the juicy bits, Marty. Give us the juicy bits.
Well, okay. Now let's remember the context. We have returns for going back to about, I think it's 2016 or the summary of returns. And Mr. Trump campaigned hard for the presidency during 2016. It was inaugurated January of 2017. The summary reflects massive multi-million-dollar losses in the tax years just prior to 2016. So the first question that has to be asked in my mind, since I've been following Trump and his campaign in 2016 for some time, are those massive losses, also known as NOLs, net operating losses, are they legitimate? If they are legitimate, and then his business was losing money hand over fist, and he is clearly no business wizard, which he was representing himself on the campaign trail. But it also represents, if he lost all this money, it represents to me, and I would think many, a really large vulnerability that could be exploited by some of our major adversaries across the seas. And I'm talking Russia and China. I mean, everyone wants to talk about the P tape and whatnot, and Mr. Trump's proclivity to pursue romantic interests outside of his marriage. And certainly that's the classic exploitive view for FSB and KGB types who are looking to extort one over their romantic issues. I want to get away from that. I think of the financial vulnerability of owing or losing millions of dollars and then walking into the presidency when you still owe something like $500 million to major financial institutions such as Deutsche Bank. That is something that could be exploited, and who knows if it was in fact exploited. So I have, by the way, I've been asked by a competing website to be on their jump team to review tax returns, and they asked me what they should be looking at. And I put on the top of the list Mr. Trump's foreign financial transactions. And something that you all should be looking at if these tax returns are going to be public is Schedule B on each of Mr. Trump's tax returns. Schedule B, not to get too deep in the weeds, is the listing, the schedule for interest and dividends. We all, have to, we get a 1099 for the $10 interest we receive from Citibank or Wells Fargo, and we have to include that on Schedule B. But at the bottom of Schedule B is a series of questions with yes, no answers. And that all has to do with ownership and transactional activity with foreign bank accounts. Now, Mr. Trump has to check off yes or no as to whether he owned any foreign bank accounts. If he in fact did, and the New York Times has suggested that he did own a bank account in China, for instance. Other media has suggested that he possibly had a bank account in Egypt, and another media outlet indicated that it's likely that Trump had a bank account in South Korea. Mm-hmm. If that's in fact true, then Mr. Trump has to check off yes. If he checks off no, and through other devices, investigative devices, it is found that he does have foreign bank accounts, then he would be liable and possibly exposed for potential criminal prosecution with regard to falsifying his tax return. And he said, well, is that a stretch, Marty? I said, no, because if you recall, Paul Manafort was investigated, indicted, and convicted for falsifying his tax returns. And it's because he checked off no when he should have checked off yes for ownership of a foreign bank account. So this is no small thing. But, when you talk about tax returns and stuff, I always suggest to folks, follow the KISS theory. Keep it as simple as possible. Keep it simple, stupid. And that's, obviously for me, that's like the best possible policy.
Right, right.
So but I would implore everyone else, if you're going to look at his tax returns, go to Schedule B and see how we go every year. All right. The next thing is, since we've set the scene with regard to these massive multi-million-dollar net OLs, net operating losses over a period of years, what to look for. I guess major question would be, how did Mr. Trump afford to invest multi-million dollars in ownership of two of the most well-known golf courses in Scotland? If he's losing all this money, where did he get the money? Did he actually make that investment, or did someone else do it for him? And what was the quid and the quo there? I mean, the golf course, what did he do to get that golf course? Two golf courses. So that is of interest there. I could keep going on, but something I wanted to talk about to address Hi-Fi's question is there's been reports in the media that the congressionally mandated requirement that Mr. Trump's tax returns be audited never, in fact, happened until Congressman Neal wrote a letter and inquired, and that precipitated the audit. And so there's several parts to that issue. First of all, I know I'm getting a little old, but I still remember Mr. Trump campaigning in 2016, claiming that he could not release his tax returns to the public like every other presidential candidate has ever done because he was under audit. And it was a lengthy audit, and it was just ongoing, and because his business was so complex, et cetera. Well, that's just malarkey. That is just baloney. And we now know that that's a misrepresentation by Mr. Trump. What is of interest to me, and I hope to your viewers, is there's a suggestion that maybe the IRS dropped the ball here. And I want to clarify something. IRS has got some of the best people with some of the highest integrity of anybody I know, of any organization I know. The typical worker bee is not going to drop that ball. And almost every employee, IRS is a huge bureaucracy. It's second to DOD in terms of government bureaucracies. And every employee has at least one boss, usually two, maybe three supervisors that they have to respond to. There are no rogue employees who decide, well, I'm not going to do that audit, or especially such a high-profile audit of a president, without having multiple supervisors say, okay, no, we're not going to do that. It's too hard, or it's too political. They can't do that. It's a congressional mandate. Every other president's had his tax returns, and every other vice president have had their tax returns audited. Trump's tax returns should have been audited. So if they were not, the only person who could have ordered that to happen or not happen would have been the commissioner of the IRS. Who is the commissioner of the IRS's boss? That is the Secretary of Treasury. At the time, the Secretary of Treasury was Mr. Steven Mnuchin, who was a close confidant of Donald Trump, likely campaign contributor, etc. And when Mr. Mnuchin left his position as Secretary of Treasury when Trump lost the election, Mr. Mnuchin quickly opened up a multiple billion-dollar investment fund located in the United Arab Emirates. And how does that happen? I don't know. Hey, stuff happens. But I want to just walk back now. Let's do a contrast. Trump doesn't get his tax returns audited, but the director and assistant director of the FBI have their tax returns audited, not just a normal regular audit, but they were subjected to the most comprehensive line-by-line audits that the IRS does, part of what's called the TCMP program, Taxpayer Compliance Measurement Program. It's done for research purposes, allegedly. Something tells me that those audits of the director of the FBI and assistant director of the FBI were not done for research purposes. So they get audited. The congressionally mandated presidential audit never happens.
Let's start over there. I don't know where that ringing came from, but let's go ahead and count
That's
you
the
in.
ring camera I have out front. I get.
Okay, so we're gonna at 14 minutes, we're gonna count him back in, and you're gonna start with, I don't know why they got audited, so we're just gonna pick it up with sort of it being curious that
Yes.
the
Okay.
FBI has. So 3, 2.
So you have a major question there, and while everybody's looking at the Trump tax returns that are going to be released in the near future, And I think what happened, what transpired with regard to the absence of the mandated audits of the president, in contrast to the audits of the comprehensive audits of the FBI director and assistant director, are a major question that needs to be explored. Now, we can go back to Mr. Trump's tax returns and some of the areas of interest. I have circled my own. Certainly, legal fees are of major interest to me because if I can go back in history a little bit for your viewers, you may recall the Michael Cohen hush money payment saga, where Michael
Yes.
Cohen fronted money for Donald Trump, hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, the stripper that Mr. Trump allegedly had a romantic liaison with. Cohen was looking for reimbursement. So the Trump organization reimburses Michael Cohen, who is an attorney, but they reimburse Michael Cohen for the hush money payments that he fronted.
Mm-hmm.
Legal fees are certainly a business expense and a legitimate tax deduction, but personal expenses are not. And I don't think there's anything more personal than, having an affair and then paying hush money for it. So that would certainly not be deductible. So what happens? Michael Cohen gets with Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of Trump Organization, and they concoct a scheme where Michael Cohen submits invoices for a legal retainer to the Trump Organization, and the Trump Organization issues checks for, I don't know, something like $30,000 a monthly for a series of months. And those checks also put down in the corner of the check, legal retainer. And Weisselberg directs his bookkeepers at the Trump Organization to post those expenses to legal fees. So the Trump Organization is taking a tax deduction for a legal fee, which is not a legal fee. It's a fictional legal fee. It's, in fact, a very personal expense. It doesn't get any more personal than that. So I note that the congressional summary has also kind of circled or tagged legal fees as an issue to be pursued. And I think that's really interesting because Southern District of New York did not pursue it. And so far to date, the New York State Attorney General has not pursued that particular issue. So let us hope that the Manhattan DA or someone else does, and let this podcast reflect some interest in that particular area. Let's focus some interest on that. Okay.
Fantastic.
So,
So I just have a couple quick things, and then Hi-Fi, you jump in. My one quick thing is let's just go to the Wayback Machine and give people a taste of what things look like in Trump's world. When the very first interview I did with you, you were talking about Deutsche Bank and Trump and their strange relationship. And one of the things that I learned in that interview is Deutsche Bank loaned money to Trump after he sued them for defaulting on a $40 million loan
yeah,
guarantee.
yeah.
Now, just for our viewers, as you read the summary and you brace yourself for these returns coming, what does something like that indicate to you?
Well, there's an unusual relationship, obviously, between Mr. Trump and Deutsche Bank, and that's something that needs to be explored. Just to fill in the context there, Mr. Trump in January of 2017 gets inaugurated. Okay, by the end of January, the Deutsche Bank reaches a major settlement with Department of Justice, who had been looking at Deutsche Bank for all sorts of different problems, including mortgage fraud and the various other things. And the original decision by Department of Justice in that area was they were looking to hit Deutsche Bank with something like between $15 and $20 million charge, penalty. Yet by the end of January, after Mr. Trump ascends to the presidency, that original charge gets cut in half. So now Deutsche Bank is actually, agreeing to a settlement of probably less than $10 million. So how does that happen? Was there a quid and a quo? Now remember also that the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, which was overseeing that investigation, he is first told he can stay on, but then later gets dismissed. And his replacement is personally interviewed by the President of the United States, which is unprecedented. That doesn't happen. No, that had never happened up until that time. And so Mr. Trump gets his personally picked attorney taking the position of U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, which is the single most powerful U.S. Attorney position in the country. They oversee all sorts of financial irregularities and investigations. So I'm just, did Mr. Trump monetize the presidency? He had every incentive to do so because, as we see from these tax returns, he had massive multi-million-dollar losses going into that presidency. And don't even get me started with regard to how the inaugural went down. And Mr. Trump's inaugural chairman required a $1 million check just to go to the inauguration, to go to the inaugural dinner in the White House. And there were a passel of people who ponied up $1 million for the honor of sitting down to a candlelight dinner with Mr. Trump. Well, I know restaurants in Washington are pretty pricey, but I want to for $1 million.
It just smells so bad.
Speaking of smelling bad, and let's Deutsche Bank has corpses piling up. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And Deutsche Bank also had their former CEO Joseph Ackerman, who moved to the Bank of Cyprus, where Wilbur Ross, Trump's commerce secretary, was on the board of the Bank of Cyprus, and supposedly Russian transactions were made through that bank. So, it's a big dirty web.
We haven't really even touched on the Mira trades that Deutsche Bank facilitated for, billions of dollars were extricated from Russia, rubles essentially, amounting to, say, maybe $15 billion, were maneuvered, finessed out of Russia down to Cyprus. From Cyprus, various banks controlled, such as the Bank of Cyprus. Monies were then sent to the UK, to New York, and then back out to the Caribbean banks, bank accounts that were sheltering shell company monies for Russians. So whatever happened to that investigation of money laundering in the Southern District of New York for Deutsche Bank? Did that get caught up in the dismissal of the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York? Or did that get caught up in, well, what did it get caught up in? Let's find out. I mean, this is a bank that Mr. Trump owed, $345 million to, and he had, he was losing money in his businesses, and suddenly there was these unique things happening where Mr. Trump is personally interviewing and selecting a U.S. attorney that's supposed to be overseeing the investigation of Deutsche Bank. And by the way, let's just remember too that you mentioned the Secretary of Commerce. The Secretary of Treasury has some overview role of the banks. And,
Right.
you know, the Secretary of Treasury controls FinCEN, and FinCEN is where suspicious activity reports are supposed to be filed with regard to folks like Mr. Epstein, who engaged in all sorts of suspicious transactions.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, does FinCEN have any suspicious activity reports on file for Donald Trump?
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't it be nice if they did, that they were then provided to a congressional committee looking at Mr. Trump's tax returns and compare? Well, we had these suspicious financial transactions. Now we have these tax returns showing, I mean, he's losing all his money. Well, you know, let's add up 1 + 1 here and see what we come up with. So
Right.
I just wanted to make that point. You know, did Trump monetize the presidency, and where should we start looking? And I think Deutsche Bank would be the perfect start. You know, with now that we have these tax returns in hand, and
It's
you go
fantastic,
from there.
Marty.
That's your baseline.
That's fantastic. You and I have, when we met, it was always about putting sunlight on these dark money and this offshoring world and this whole world. And I think that we may be one step closer.
Well, I hope.
I hope we are. I hope we are. Thank you so much. I just kept reflecting on a lot of things that I learned from my friend Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who is a historian of Italian fascism, and she wrote a book called Strong Men. And these guys come to power quite often, historically, to hide their corruption. They come to power utilizing propaganda, utilizing creating destabilization where they can come and say, I am the one who's going to fix it. And if what this report is indicating is true, and he is coming into the presidency with all of these losses, and now we're going to examine moving forward whether or not there was profiteering. We know every day he's at a Trump hotel with his Secret Service, playing golf with his Secret Service. How is that not profiting off the presidency? And that's just one small example. So this is a story that is far from over. And I do hope moving into 2023, even with the slim, margin of the Republican Congress, that we are going to get some answers, and that this man has, finally expired one too many lives. So we'll see.
We will.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much, Marty. And I wish you and your family the most jolliest of holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Look forward to
Merry Christmas.
Look forward to another breaking news special with Martin Sheil.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Marty.
All right. Happy holidays.
Thank you.